Hey, I'm Dr. SCL. I'm a dad, a chiropractor, and the translator you didn't know you needed in this, the first year of parenting. This is Decoded, the first year, the podcast that turns baby brain confusion, mum burnout, and milestone panic into clarity you can actually use. Let's make sense of the chaos by decoding it together. This is Decoded, the first year. I'm Dr. SCL, dad, chiropractor, and your neurology nerd who decodes but doesn't diagnose to help you understand childhood development without Google spiraling. Now, last time we talked about crawling, and crawling now has become optional. Not according to biology, definitely not in neurology, but on paper. And that should make us pause. Not panic, but I mean really pause. Because when something fundamental disappears from the conversation, it doesn't mean it stopped being important. It usually means we stopped knowing how to explain it. And to take that one step further, crawling and walking often get talked about as separate milestones. But neurologically, they are part of the same conversation, for they are connected by a bridge, and that bridge is nervous system organisation. Today, I'm going to decode crawling and walk through that bridge, which connects being both horizontal, in other words, crawling, to being vertical, in other words, walking. What actually binds them in the nervous system within this bridge, and why so many babies now skip this bridge, and what that really means if your baby does or doesn't. So most conversations jump from, is my baby crawling, to, are they walking yet? And they do that really quickly. And that is because crawling was removed from the milestone lists because fewer babies were doing it. But neurology doesn't update itself based on trends. And the nervous system doesn't go from horizontal to upright overnight. It layers. It stacks layer upon layer. Because the brain develops in sequence. Reflexes integrate in order. And movement is still the primary driver of that process. So when crawling disappears, it's not neutral. It changes what and how things get built. And most importantly, when. Now, as I've mentioned previously, crawling is one of the most neurologically dense movements an infant can do. For crawling to emerge well, several things need to be online. First, there are your postural reflexes, which include the development of the head righting reflex, trunk righting or propping reflexes, and equilibrium responses, in other words, balance. These reflexes allow a baby to shift weight left to right, front to back, lose balance ever so slightly, and recover without panic. Secondly, we require the integration of our primitive reflexes, and crawling helps integrate some of these, such as the asymmetrical tonic neck reflex, which supports left and right coordination. Elements of the symmetrical tonic neck reflex, which links arms and legs through the spine. If these reflexes remain dominant, crawling often looks awkward, avoided, or skipped altogether. And that's going to demonstrate itself in walking, coordination, and learning later in life. Thirdly, we require a cross-lateral brain communication. In other words, we want the left side and the right side of our brain to have a chat. You see, when a baby crawls with opposite arm and leg, they're wiring what's called the corpus callosum, and that's the bridge between the two hemispheres of our brain. Now, that connection matters later on for coordination, attention, reading and writing, all the way down to emotional regulation. Now, crawling also loads the shoulders and hips. It activates proprioceptive input, That means we can understand where our body is in space. This input calms our nervous system. It organizes tone of muscles and joints, and it therefore creates confidence in movement. When crawling is skipped, none of this will disappear, but the nervous system has to find other, typically less efficient ways to build it later. In other words, it compensates, and compensations are always intended as a short-term strategy. Skipping crawling isn't failure, it's a shortcut. And when walking emerges from this, not instead of it, walking comes too early. It often replaces exploration. The baby is upright, but the nervous system is still organizing underneath. That's when walking looks stiff, wide-based, and overly cautious. Not wrong, just early. Now, I often see toddlers who walked early, but fatigue easily and avoid complex movements, or they struggle to coordinate the two sides of their body. And when we trace their story back, there is often minimal time spent crawling or crawling that lacked rhythm and control. And then there are children that I see who crawled for months, slow, intentional, repetitive. They then climb with ease, adapt quickly, and their bodies trust themselves. Not because crawling was magical, but you could argue it kind of is, but because their nervous system had time to integrate the necessary bridge between horizontal and vertical. So I want to leave you with a particular case, an example that I saw this week. A 13-month-old child who was standing and beginning to cruise around. In other words, they're walking around furniture using it as support. They'd taken a few independent steps, but nothing consistent as of yet. This child crawled at about 8 months, which is spot on. They had rolled, they had sat. According to a chart and timing mechanisms, they had ticked all other milestones perfectly. But Mum had concerns. You see, the child had always crawled with their hips being narrow but their legs spread wide apart. They had one leg constantly rotated outwards compared to the other. And then, in passing, while having a conversation, Mum dropped a bomb on me. It's just a passing comment, but it stuck with me. She said that when playing with kiddo, they'd always noticed that when they pull the child to a sitting position from laying on their back, their head had always lagged well behind. So you ask, what on earth does this have to do with crawling? Head lag, described in that scenario, always indicates a lack of tone in the muscular system. A lack of tone in the muscular system will always be associated with neurological compromise. And that lack of tone will allow the hips to appear more flexible. More flexible hips means less stability. Less stability means alternate crawling posture. Alternate crawling posture means stability and coordination challenges when standing, moving, throwing, and even learning later on in life. And none of that is ever going to show up on a chart. If your baby is crawling, let them stay there. They're not delayed, they're organising. And that's integration. If your baby skipped crawling, don't panic. Have trust that neuroplasticity is real. But neuroplasticity needs support. And support needs to be in the form of ensuring that the layers of the nervous system organisation that build the bridge between horizontal and vertical are efficiently done, effectively functioning, and ideally displaying themselves effortlessly. The key is understanding what crawling builds, not just whether it happened. That's exactly why my baby milestone decoder helps you see it. It helps you see it with clarity, context, and no pressure. Send me a DM decoder to @Mount Hawthorn Chiropractic on the socials if you'd like a copy of that baby milestone decoder. Mum, keep being present. You're crushing this. You're a great mum. It's okay to ask for help. That's why I'm here. Dr. SCL, out. Thanks for listening to Decoded, the first year, where we translate the mess of early parenting into something that actually makes sense. Be sure to share this episode with a friend, a partner, or a mum that you know who is quietly struggling through the noise and secretly Googling every milestone. If you want to hear more decoding, follow @Mount Hawthorn Chiropractic on the socials. Let's keep decoding the chaos. No mansplaining, no pressure, no judgment, just clarity when you need it most. Please note, this podcast isn't medical advice. It's just smart strategies from a Gonstead chiropractor, a dad, and someone who's been in the room with hundreds of mums trying to make sense of their baby's development, their own postpartum recovery, and the constant noise that comes with modern parenting. Always chat with your health team for specific care.